just having content out there is so important, because the way I think about it is like, you want to keep putting content out, release, while also looking to top of funnel. Like that's how those two things interact together, where if you're consistently putting out content that's good, sooner or later something is going to catch on, whether that is organically, via the ads, like one of those two things will catch on. And now you have people coming into your ecosystem and listening to this one song. But what they'll do if you have tons of content is go listen to your entire album or all your singles or watch all your videos. And so now this point of like, hey, this thing has traction, you're not a flash in the pan.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 242. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me, as always, is my awesome co-host, Mr. Ed Isola. Ed, what's going on, dude? I'm really excited about today's topic because I think it's a question that you and I get a lot when we talk with artists and bands about what they should be focusing on. So I'm really excited, and I'm excited to be here with you today, my friend. What's up?
I am excited to be here with you as well. And yes, I think that it is going to be a really cool kind of topic because it's something that applies across all levels of artists, which sometimes we can kind of get into like, hey, this is specifically for ascension level or grassroots level, but this is something that really anybody who's doing any kind of digital marketing for their music or creativity or really just in general needs to be aware of, because it applies everywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to go even broader, I think this is a concept that applies to businesses of any kind, but it can especially be true for creative businesses. And that's why this question comes up so often when I'm talking with artists and bands, whether it be people that are interested in working with us at IndieX to help them grow, or when I'm consulting with artists and just trying to help them get to taking the next step on their own. A big question often comes up of like, where do I focus? There's so many things to be doing when it comes to my marketing. And it's really easy to get overwhelmed with that. And so we kind of wanted to come here today and talk about the fact that I think in our opinion, and I don't want to speak totally for Ed here, I think there are really only three big areas or compartments that you can focus on in your business. And if you can find where any effort that you might be pulling, if you can find where it fits into one of these three sort of categories, then you'll know that you're focusing in the right place. And it also allows you to know where and when to focus that attention. And those categories are really, as an artist, what you need to be focusing on doing is, number one, creating attention. Number two, capturing that attention and holding on to it. And number three, monetizing that attention. Create, capture, monetize. These are kind of like the three big buckets or umbrellas, and everything else in the buddy system kind of falls under one of these three chain links. And that's what we wanted to talk about here today. Now, if you're new to any of this kind of music marketing talk and a lot of the topics that we've discussed on this show leading up to today and anything in the future, then you definitely want to join us inside of Indie Pro, which is our membership community for independent artists and bands and musicians to help them learn direct response digital marketing. So if you're not inside Indie Pro, make sure you jump in. We'll leave a link to Indie Pro in the show notes. We'd love to have you in our community and help you grow your music career. Now, diving into the concept of these areas of low-hanging fruit, this is a lot of the work that we do with artists when they come onto the agency. We really take a pretty holistic view of their music business and see what's happening in each of these areas and how can we help to sort of prop them up if something is weak.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like you said, as people come in, probably, at IndieX definitely, and probably also within Indie Pro, I know that I was kind of in this boat where I didn't understand what Jack just said at very early days. I jumped in and I was like, let me do this training, right? Like, let me figure out what a fan finder is. Let me film that. Let me run these ads. And I was doing it very much so because Cirque was kind of just like, hey, this is what I think you should be doing. This, you should do this and then do this. And he was walking me through this process of create, capture, monetize, but I didn't have a framework for it. So I think that that's actually a really important thing. Just like take a second, maybe write down those 3 words and understand that like the framework with which you are promoting your music, or you're building your ecosystem, it really is as simple as those 3 tent poles at like the highest level. Now, like Jack said, you will have different levels underneath it of like everything you're doing will factor into one of those 3 things. And there's different ways to create, there's different ways to capture, there's different ways to monetize. That's obvious. But the fact that you should always be creating, capturing, and monetizing, any big business is doing that. Any small business that's successful is doing that. And it's that kind of high level overview and understanding that I think allows you, once you grasp that, to pull more from the trainings versus starting at the trainings, not understanding that, and just doing things, doing tasks. That's very much how I operate. But once I was able to kind of realize like, oh, I'm just creating, I'm capturing, or I'm monetizing, like those are the things that are consistently going in the rotating buddy system. I feel like I just was able to then go to a whole different level of marketing where you start to get creative and that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to stress that like definitely worth taking the time to sit with that, understand it, and really kind of internalize it, because it allows you to expand from that. And like Jack said, when people come in, whether Indie Pro or Indie X or just starting marketing in general, that's something that sounds really like, duh. Of course, we're just creating attention, getting contact with people, and then selling them stuff, right? But the more you sit with it and dig into it, it does take a second to kind of make it a part of your marketing DNA and start to incorporate it. And it's so worthwhile, because once you get comfortable with it, you don't think about it anymore. You just start to realize like, oh, I need some top of funnel. I need some email signups, that kind of thing. So it allows you to streamline your efforts as they go once you fully understand this kind of concept.
Well, I think it's interesting that, as artists, we're really focused on doing certain things, right? A lot of artists are focused on like, I need to be releasing, I need to be consistent in my releases. And that's obviously really important. That falls under that first umbrella of creating attention. But I think you said it well, Ed, that like when you're so task oriented, a lot of times you can lose track of how what you're doing actually is benefiting your business as a whole, or how it's building upon itself. We talked about that a few episodes ago when we were talking about like allowing everything you do in your music business, every release, for example, or every launch, to build upon itself and to drive growth for you kind of across your whole audience. This is kind of a very similar concept here of like what's going on in your business, what's going on in your marketing in each of these categories that is going to eventually push forward into the next one. So when we talk about low-hanging fruit, one of the questions that I ask artists is like, all right, well, usually when I'm having a consultation with an artist, I've got a little bit of a sense of what they've been up to. I've looked at their social media, for example. I've looked at what they've released, so I can see their music videos. I can see if they're running any ads to get new fans, to get new listeners. I have a sense of how big their email list is, and maybe I've got a little bit of a sense of what their online store looks like and how they're doing revenue-wise. So then I'm asking questions like, okay, when was your last release? What did you do to support it? Are you running ads to get new fans? I might ask, okay, you've got an email list of this size. Where did those people come from? How are you capturing the attention that you have? Are you doing that consistently? Did they just kind of find their way, like stumble their way onto your email list? So you can kind of see like the questions here, I'm asking for a specific purpose to find out, what's been done or being done in all of these categories. You've got a store. Okay, cool. I see that you're pulling in a little bit of sales every month. What does that process look like for you? How often are you releasing new merch? How often are you selling? What are you doing on an e-commerce side for each release or every launch that you do for singles or full albums or EPs or merch drops? What's kind of going on all of those areas in the monetized category? How are you selling to existing customers? These are the kind of questions that I ask to see what's going on under each of these bigger umbrellas: create, capture, monetize. And then from there, when you get a sense of what those answers are, you can look back and say, okay, well, like, here's the low-hanging fruit. Like, I don't have a way of getting people paying attention to me. That squarely falls under the creating attention category, right? So you would look and see like, okay, what kind of content do I have that I could run advertising on to get new fans? Or am I not being consistent enough in my release schedule to really be creating some kind of momentum for myself if you're going the sort of organic route? So I say all of that to really kind of underline what you mentioned, Ed, of like, there are a lot of activities that fall under each of these three buckets, and it makes your life as a creative business person much easier when you can start to categorize the efforts that you're putting into one of these areas based on what your needs are. We talked a lot about this actually a few months ago. We did an episode specifically on top of funnel advertising, episode 223. I'll link to it in the show notes, because if you feel stuck on the create side of things, getting ads going is a really fast way to get you attention, to start creating attention. You can do it for very little money. You know, you don't need a huge budget to get started. So I'll make sure we link to that in the show notes, because that's a great way to kick off. If you think that, like, if you're hearing this and you're like, oh my God, the low hanging fruit is that I don't even know how to get attention, let alone capture it or monetize it. Well, definitely can solve that problem for you pretty quickly with some ads. But I say all that to really just underline, like, it's helpful to be able to categorize what you're doing into one of these three areas. And then that kind of leads the path for you to find out like what the low-hanging fruit is and what you should be focusing on next.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like, if Jack just low-key stressed you out with all the questions he was asking about how he audits these things.
Good.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, don't be stressed out about it, because what he just ran through essentially is like the questions that you should be asking yourself. That doesn't mean you have to have an answer for those things right now when he's talking about how are you monetizing your Shopify store and that kind of stuff. Like, it might be worth it to rewind the episode after you listen through this and like jot those things down, because that was a very good run through of like how to look at if you're doing create, capture, and monetize at the deeper level, right? Like earlier on, we said, hey, if the three pillars are this, you'll have different ways to go about creating and capturing and monetizing. That was a really good list of questions to ask yourself as you get a better understanding. But I think what Jack also just touched on at the end of that thought was the fact that you can just say like, hey, how am I creating visibility for myself musically? And like, just sit for yourself for 10 minutes and say, what am I doing for top of funnel? Right? Like if I answer that question for myself right now, I'd say, well, we're not doing too much, honestly. We are, and we should be doing more, but like right now we're at a place where we're consistently posting online on TikTok, like letting that kind of run as it does, and stuff goes viral from here to there. And we maybe have about $20 of top of funnel spend going, which is dramatically down from earlier this year. But we're kind of in the period of, hey, it's okay. Let's keep pulling people onto our email list and let's keep monetizing. And we're working on new music and new videos that will feed into the create visibility portion shortly here. And so like, that's just a really quick overview of if I'm doing that exercise myself, saying, what am I doing to create? Well, nothing but my plan to get there to start running more expensive top of funnel campaigns is this, right? So I have the plan to get to that. Capturing, we're reworking our opt-in, so I have the plan for that. And monetizing, we're making sales promos. And so like, if the pillars are create, capture, and monetize, you want to be doing those, but like, you don't have to always be doing the three of those things at the same time. There's naturally going to be cycles of like, hey, my top of funnel is going great. Oh man, it's tapering off. I need to revisit, get new content, right? So like, to me, it feels like a game of you're consistently trying to kind of like pour water into the buckets, and there's a small hole at the bottom of the bucket, if that makes sense. And so like, you'll fill it up, something will be working, and then eventually it's going to start decreasing and you got to go fill it up again. Like, and that's totally okay. But having these three pillars in mind is the way you keep looking at, like, is the capture bucket full? No, okay, I need to go do something to fill that up, like some type of structure to fill that up. It's kind of my thought process to it.
Yeah, that's super good. I mean, and that's a lot of what we do at the agency, right? Like we help artists to pivot through these areas as things evolve and change and as campaigns, fatigue and taper off. Here, I'll put it in like the simplest terms. You can create attention around music that, is old. I recently had an indie who asked me like, I'm just getting started with running ads. I'm learning the fan finder method, which you can check out inside of Indie Pro if you don't know what the fan finder method is. Again, link to that in the show notes. It's a top of funnel advertising strategy with music video content. He was saying to me, I'm learning the fan finder method and I want to know what should I be using? What kind of content should I be using for this? I've got new music that is really well representative of me, but I don't have a lot of video assets that would really be great for it yet. Should I wait? And I was like, no, if you've got older stuff that really fits the spec of what you'll need to run these kinds of ads, you should get started now. Now, will that last forever? No. And does that mean when you have new content, new music videos, new releases, that you shouldn't pivot into using that? Of course not. Like if you've got something that you feel like really represents you, like freshen it up, right? That's what happens when campaigns of any kind start to get old, is like they need to be freshened up or reskinned. And that's a lot of what we do at the agency, is like build campaigns, optimize them for as long as they can go, reskin them when needed, refresh them when needed, put new fuel on the fire based on what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're creating. And I think that is one of the biggest benefits that artists, bands have when it comes to this kind of marketing, is like, you're creating constantly in so many instances. Like you are a creative machine coming up with new music, coming up with new content. This differentiates you so much compared to like a coffee shop or a bar or a restaurant or a doctor's office, who aren't doing those things. So the fuel for them to refresh their marketing assets is a little bit more of a lift in a lot of ways. So like, I hope that empowers you as an artist to just be like, oh, I'm a wellspring of cool creative ideas that I can use to just constantly be filling these buckets when they're needed.
That's a really kind of interesting idea. And I don't think that it's very necessarily easy to know how to channel your creativity, because you said like a coffee shop is going to be, there's their menu, right? Unless they're cycling through their menu every other week, which is maybe like 1 out of every 50 restaurants. It's like they have their menu. What are they talking about? As an artist, you have a lot, like Jack just said, but you do have to figure out how to channel that and how to get content that allows you to channel that. So that in itself is a process, but it's a worthwhile one, because if you can figure out how to allow people into your world via email and ads and all the stuff we're talking about right now, eventually you'll have the structure where things can kind of flow into it, which is great. And I wanted to kind of circle back to the idea around like, should I only push new music? And it's like, why? Like, it's new music to new people if they've never heard you before, is the way I always think about it.
Yeah.
And it's just such a funny idea that like, hey, this song came out 2 years ago, but I'm not going to do it. It's like, all right, well, who cares, right? Like we're still running ads from time to time for Magdalene, and that video came out 2.5 years ago. Like, at this point, what's the difference though? That kind of thing, where it's like, oh, we still get comments on these video ads we're running being like, man, what's this song? Love this song. What is this?
You guys are a great example of this too. Like your organic strategy on TikTok, when it came to a lot of your songs, especially ones that were going viral, was like, if we had a post that went viral, post it again in a few weeks, and it's likely that it was going to go viral again and new people were going to hear it. And that's just the organic side.
Yeah. And it's like a really funny, because I actually have heard multiple people say at this point, that was kind of our original thought, Jack and I, when we were doing this, like, hey, should we post this again? And then fast forward a year, and I've heard different people, different like TikTok agencies and that kind of stuff say like, hey, you should post these videos that work well, like once every 6 weeks, and just post them. And it's like, oh, okay, so everyone literally just says like, if the video is good, keep posting it, because it's going to pull new people in. And I guess the way I get over that hurdle is that some artists would probably combat that by saying, well, I don't want to do that because it feels very spammy to just post the same video every 6 to 8 weeks. And like, the way I think about it is like, well, I actually legitimately enjoy that video and I go watch it myself all the time. So I'm going to repost it because I love it. / there's people out there who didn't see it the first time around who are probably going to see it this time, who are then going to like us more and come listen to us and build the ecosystem more and more. And anybody that's like a fan, this is especially true on TikTok. Anybody that I think if a song goes viral, there's very little pushback to it being like, oh, get this song off my For You page. I heard it too much. For whatever reason, the way things go viral on TikTok, it's very organic. And so if something is viral, nobody gets tired of it. Like I'm still hearing, I don't know, Noah Khan's Stick Season song and Zach Bryan, like literally are the two songs I hear on my For You page for the last 6 months. And I'm not tired of them yet. In the sense, I don't see a video with them and be like, oh God, screw this song. I'm just like, all right, here's another song with that audio that I'm used to, because I think TikTok has trained people to just accept that audios get used over and over again there. And so it's not a negative to keep pushing. It would probably look a little more spammy if you were just posting the same video on your Instagram feed every 4 weeks. Like people would be like, what the hell? But TikTok specifically, I think you can do that. And so you can push old content too. But like to just touch on that idea, if you have songs that you're like, hey, I think these lyrics are great, like especially on TikTok, feels like you should give them their moment or opportunity to shine. That's something we've tried to be really good about. And like, we're still circling back and being like, hey, this album came out last year. I think that this song has some really good lyrics that are relatable. Let's try to post them. Let's see how it goes. Right? Like, and labels and that kind of stuff will tell you, don't do that. Post your new stuff, post your new stuff. But TikTok is kind of timeless in the sense that the band Sales, if you guys are familiar with them, they had a song that was like 4 or 5 years old, go super viral. The one that was like, Pope is a rock star, whatever that song was.
Oh yeah.
That song is like 4 or 5 years old and it went super viral by chance. And it's like, I didn't know that. I thought it was a new song. And so all I'm saying is don't be afraid to post old stuff, especially if you're at the place where you're like, well, I don't have any new stuff to post. It's like, okay, well then just go into your catalog and start getting things that some content is better than no content in my opinion.
So that's actually a really good point. And I think 2 things here. That falls well under the creating attention pillar, but also it definitely relates to the capturing attention or keeping attention pillar, right? Like once people are in your world, this applies, I think, with all sorts of different kind of content, not necessarily just the stuff that went quote unquote viral, but like one of our clients at IndieX is a YouTuber, and a practice that they do organically on socials is often repost their YouTube videos that fans have liked, and they're older ones, and they repost them on socials just to give people, kind of like a throwback, something to pay attention to, something to watch, something to revisit. It's a really great way of capturing people's attention or keeping the attention of new people that are coming in, because for 2 reasons. One, the people that are already in your world, they want to keep revisiting, just in the same way that like when you find something new, you go and binge on Netflix and you watch everything that you're now interested in. I just recently got into the new Lord of the Rings show on Amazon Prime, Rings of Power, and I got into it a little late, but I caught the first episode and I was immediately hooked, and then I blitzed through the remaining 4 that were available in one weekend. So that's like prime example of someone new coming into a world, and like now my attention is captured, right? And it's really captured because I've got more stuff to watch and it's being actively put in front of me. If I was already interested, right, and a fan of something, here's another example, personal life. I love Doctor Who. I'm a big Doctor Who fan. I've rewatched a lot of episodes, right? I think that this is the easiest corollary to make in entertainment. You definitely go back and rewatch your favorite movies, right? You definitely go back and rewatch your favorite episodes of shows that you love. Content on social, it's the same concept, right? It's like replaying episodes or replaying movies that you really like. But it can be your music videos. It can be, your vlogs. It can be blogs that you post on your website. Really, whatever kind of content you make can apply here. And I think that that's an easy sort of way to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. To kind of touch on your point previously about like people are going to want to dive into new content when you have it, right? Like I will sometimes intentionally wait, like the new Game of Thrones show I was telling you. I was like, man, I want to watch that. but the entire show's not out yet. And the way I'm able to watch things right now with my schedule is like just watch it all at once versus like 1 hour a week. And so I'm like intentionally waiting for this entire kind of like season to come out so that I can watch it and binge it all at once. And so like to Jack's point, just having content out there is so important, because the way I think about it is like you want to keep putting content out, release, while also looking to top of funnel. Like that's how those two things interact together, where if you're consistently putting out content that's good, sooner or later something is going to catch on, whether that is organically, via the ads, like one of those two things will catch on. And now you have people coming into your ecosystem and listening to this one song. But what they'll do if you have tons of content is go listen to your entire album or all your singles or watch all your videos. And so now this point of like, hey, this thing has traction, you're not a flash in the pan. I feel like that's something that you can see a lot with virality, where I think we're a good example of having such a depth of content that when people came in, it wasn't just like, oh, I like the sound. It was like, what's this song? Wait, I actually like both of these albums that have been released. Let me like that. Zach Bryan's a really good example of that too, where he started off a few years ago with like 1 or 2 videos that went super viral. But because he had these albums that were very, very good, people went in and they started listening to him and watching his videos on YouTube. Like he was a guy that would just record videos and post them on his YouTube. And like they weren't like super well done, you know, not to knock the videos, but it was very much something we could all pull off in our room with like a microphone and a single view camera. They were just good content, but he had that stuff available. So as he went viral and got more attention, he was able to like unintentionally put his prongs into people, if that makes sense. Like it takes people from saying, hey, I like this one song from this artist to like, hey, I actually like 4 songs from this artist. Oh wait, now like they're kind of one of my top listened artists. And then that is a whole other thing. So,
right. It goes from I like this song by this artist or these songs by this artist to I like this artist, you know, or yeah. I love this band. Like I think that's really what the capture sort of pillar is all about, both from a content side, and it also applies to, you know, building up one-to-one channels, which is something that we didn't talk about too heavily here, but like building up your text list, building up your email list, and coming up with ways to do that. That's something you need to be able to do under that pillar. Is you capture people's attention with your content, you know, with the existing content that you have or with new content that's coming out, you keep them in your world, and then you move them through to a place where you can communicate with them, you know, one-to-one. You've got that attention captured in a place that you own.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked, like Jack said, we talked a lot about like top of funnel type stuff, but to me, that's kind of the tip of the spear. But yeah, when it gets into like, how do I then communicate with people? There are ways that you can kind of capture attention by consistently posting. Obviously, like getting people onto your email or text list is like the best way to keep in touch with them. Staying active on your socials, those kind of are the 3 things to me that are like going live on videos. Like that's the kind of stuff where it's like, oh, okay, this is something that I need to continue to do. And then monetizing stuff, honestly, is like the easiest part. If you're doing a good job at the first 2, it's like just make an offer, send some emails, post on your socials about it. It's like that part is relatively easy, not to sound like callous towards it. But if you do a good job generating attention and communicating with people and getting them onto your lists, selling things is really easy as an artist. It's just like, hey, new music, new shirts. Like, here's my vinyl. Like, people want to buy if they like you as an artist. And so the legwork goes in the first 2 steps, in my opinion.
Dude, I love that you just took like one of the hardest things to do and made it the easiest, because it's so true. Like anything, if you've done the first 2 pillars well and you continue to, then the only hard part about number 3 is monetizing, is making offers and making great offers. That's the hardest part. And if you can do that, and you can do that consistently, both to get people into that space for the first time, right? Like getting someone to buy for the very, very first time, and then continuing to get them to buy, then you've got a winning formula, really. But it's so funny that you said I think you're right. It's the easiest and the hardest.
Yeah. I mean, I just view it as like, say you're going to go run a half marathon, right? Like the half marathon itself is probably going to be challenging, but the harder part, really you just show up for that. and you do it. Like the harder part of getting ready to do a half marathon is the months of preparation before it. And that's kind of how I view the top of funnel and like communication and capturing that kind of stuff. It's like, that's really the legwork that you're doing. And then you got to make cool offers and that kind of stuff. But like at that point, you're just showing up and doing it because you're investing so much in the steps before. So
I'm going to make sure we link back to, I was just thinking about this. We did an episode back in the winter time last year, episode 207, where we talked about where major artists get stuck in their marketing. And it's funny, what we found and saw through auditing, actually it was through auditing the ad account of a major label, a lot of what we were seeing was major artists with huge fan bases stuck in, you know, creating attention, and that was really it. They were missing out on the whole pillar of monetizing that attention. And to your point, Ed, so much of that would have been easy with, you know, just some well thought out, well planned out offer strategies and putting that in front of those fans. That's really like, I think that's the biggest area where artists with big fan bases kind of miss out. So I'll make sure we link to that episode in the show notes, but I wanted to make sure we mention that because we see that so often.
Yeah. And it's just, by the way, this is no fault of like, if you're listening, you're like, man, I haven't been doing a good job creating or capturing or monetizing. It's like, okay, no worries. Just start doing it. And there you go. Now you're 2 steps ahead of everybody else, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that I agree. Like the spirit of this whole episode really for you guys was to put together a framework for you to think about finding the low hanging fruit in your music business in a way that is kind of simple. You know, it's a simple framework. It's like, look in one of these 3 areas and find what you've been doing, categorize what you've been doing, and then plug the holes, you know, fill the gaps.
That's it. Create, capture, monetize, figure out, like Jack said, where you need to be focusing and start putting intentional efforts in to either learn how to do that or to actually do it.
I think that's well said. I hope you guys take this framework and apply it into your music business right now. It's really easy to do. Honestly, you could do it with a piece of paper. Write down, create attention, capture attention, monetize attention, write down all the daily activities, the monthly activities, the year-long plans that you have, and put them under one of these 3 pillars. And then from there, you can see what might be missing for you and how you can kind of ramp up from there. So I hope you guys take this and dig it. We'll catch you guys next time on Creative Juice. Peace out.